everyone, welcome to another episode of Cosmic Conversations. I'm your hostess, Marla Martenson, and I have a very, very special guest with me today. His name is Radhanath Swami. He was born Richard Slavin in Chicago, Illinois. And at the age of 17, he traveled overland from Amsterdam to India, where he lived in Himalayan caves, learned yoga from revered masters, and eventually became a world-renowned spiritual teacher and leader. He divides his time between Mumbai and the rest of the world, and his latest book, The Journey Within, this fabulous book, it guides readers through the main tenets of Bhakti-yoga and Hinduism. And the top institutions in the world look to this man. I mean, he hasn't had a bank account in 40 years. He sleeps on the floor. And he's Harvard, MIT, London School of Economics, Google, Apple, Starbucks, IBM are just a few of the companies that want him to speak. So, welcome.
Thank you, Marla. It's an honor and my joy to be with you and all of your viewers today.
Thank you so much. So tell us, just for people who aren't familiar with you, how does a Jewish boy from Chicago end up becoming a Swami in India? This is fantastic.
Well, I wrote a book about it called The Journey Home, and I guess it begins living in the 1960s as a teenager in northern part of Illinois. And when I was about 10 years old, my father went into bankruptcy. He was a dealer of Edsels, a particular car that didn't really do so well. And at that time, soon after, I would get jobs to try to, help. And in my jobs, I usually worked with African American people from the south side of Chicago. They were about my father's age, and they loved me, and I loved these beautiful people, and I could see that they really didn't have a chance at that time to come out of poverty and to come out of a state where they were being there was so many prejudices against them. And at the same time, every morning when I would go to school, I would pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, which concluded one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. And it didn't make sense to me. It seemed like there was liberty and justice for some people, but not other people. So I was confused. And as I grew older, I joined the civil rights movement with the people of Martin Luther King. And I became a part of the counterculture. The Vietnam War was raging. And I had elder brothers of friends and even friends who went to Vietnam. And some were killed, some came back wounded or really disoriented. And they didn't even believe in what they were fighting for. So I just was confused, and I had questions. And I wanted to make a difference in the world. And I didn't really see a meaningful life unless certain questions were answered about what was happening and where I fit in. And that gradually led me to a spiritual quest. When I was 19 years old, 1970, I went for what was supposed to be a 2-month trip to Europe between college semesters. And it was at that time that I became so spiritually obsessed. I was spending most of my time in monasteries and cathedrals and synagogues and forests and museums, and ultimately living in a cave in a Greek island. And there I was just praying and crying for direction, and I heard a voice. It was a silent voice within my heart that was calling me to India to try to find the answers to the questions, to try to find myself. And, at a certain point, I really felt a need for spirituality, but I saw so much hate and arrogance and prejudice in the name of a loving God. It really confused me. And I came to a conclusion: either I have to reject religion, or there must be an essence that lies at the heart of every great religion that awakens love, that's beautiful and that unites people. And I really believed that that essence was there. So I was searching for that. And I left my friend in a cave in Greece, and alone I hitchhiked through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, where I studied Islam. And eventually I came to India, where I studied different branches of Buddhism and Hinduism and yoga. And eventually in Vrindavan, which is the place of Bhakti-yoga. Bhakti means the yoga of love. It's a practice which focuses on seva, which means unselfish service to God, to humanity, to all beings. It very much emphasizes the great need of awakening compassion, and ultimately, through chanting God's names and through service and through living a life oriented by this spirit, we awaken the dormant love for God that is within all living beings. And it was there in Vrindavan where God is called upon by the name Krishna, which means the all-attractive one. It's a holy place that has about 5,000 temples, and millions of people come there on pilgrimage. And I met my guru, Srila Prabhupada, and I eventually became a Swami to try to assist in trying to help people to integrate essential universal spiritual principles in everyday lives.
And you were living in caves. How long did you live in caves? This is so fascinating. Did you just find a cave and you just claim it? Or were there other people living in caves?
I lived in several caves. Some in Greece and various caves in the Himalayan jungles. I lived under trees and on riverbanks. And in fact, the whole time I was in India, I kind of had a rule in my own life: I would never sleep under a roof or indoors of a man-made house.
Uh-huh.
I haven't followed that in many years, but that was my spirit when I was a teenage boy in my early 20s on my journey.
And at this point in your life, do you have many possessions? Or because you travel a lot, do you really pretty much, just have your clothes or what?
Well, as you said, I haven't had a bank account since 1969.
Okay.
I have some things that I use just to keep my body and soul together in my efforts to try to serve.
Well, I ask this because I remember when I had a divorce from my last husband. I was in my 30s, and we'd lived in Chicago. Then we moved back to LA. Things imploded, and I decided I'm going to go back to Chicago. I was just too upset about it, and I packed a few boxes, left them at my dad's house. He would send them on later. I arrived in Chicago with like 2 suitcases and my little dog, and I stayed in this little kind of hotel that let you stay for a month or two. I had very little things, just a few clothes, a few notebooks, and I was looking around for a job. And I tell you, all those things that I had packed up, I never needed. And I felt so light and free. And then I got an apartment, and it was small. I always had small places. But then you acquire. And now my husband and I have a house, and I have my studio here, and the things, and you go through, and my gosh, and you don't realize how many things. And when we moved to a house, it's like it took days to and I just think, how freeing would it be not to have so much stuff or any stuff. And I find it interesting, maybe you can speak on this, how humans, we get so attached to objects. We can't get rid of stuff. It's like maybe this emotion gets attached to things.
Thank you. That was an amazing tale.
Okay.
In the Bhagavad Gita, the essential scripture of India, Krishna, the speaker, tells in one verse, Bhaktaram yagya tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram, that true peace is something that's actually within us. If we cannot find it within us, then we can't really find it anywhere. There's an analogy of a lotus flower. A lotus flower, when it blossoms, whether it's in the muddiest pond or the clearest pond, it's the same. It gives off beautiful fragrance and beauty for all to experience. So similarly, when we actually find peace within ourselves, we can not only be in that peace, but we can spread that peace wherever we may be. And in order to find that peace, this beautiful verse explains, it's important to understand that we're not proprietors of anything. Proprietorship indicates control. And ultimately, by the power of time and various forces within time, we're very vulnerable. And all of our possessions, our intelligence, our abilities, our property, our wealth, everything is eventually going to be taken away from us. So the Gita tells that we are caretakers. Everything is divine, everything is sacred, because everything is coming from the same one God, who's the Father, the Mother, and the innermost friend of every living being. And when we recognize that whatever intelligence or abilities or wealth or things we may have, it's God's property. It's sacred property, and it's meant to be utilized in harmony with our true nature, which is to love and to use it with compassion and to see the equality of all beings as brothers and sisters and to live with that compassion. And then actually, whether we're billionaires or millionaires or whether we're swamis or yogis living in caves with nothing, we can really find true peace because we're utilizing whatever little we have or don't have in a spirit of service without selfishness and arrogance and greed. And in order to actually live like that, it's important that we make that connection with our own true selves.
That's a great point, because I know in our society we put self-worth on how much money we make, what kind of job we have, how we look, the clothing, youth, all of this, instead of going inside for our worth. I noticed that.
Yeah. If I can say,
go ahead.
Just last year, I was invited from my home in Mumbai in India to Dubai. Mm-hmm. I was asked to speak in the royal ballroom of a 7-star hotel. Mm-hmm. And there was some of the wealthiest people of Dubai, billionaires and millionaires, and so many people. And I was asked to speak to them. The ambassador of India to Dubai introduced me and said, in this most luxurious ballroom, in an audience of some of the wealthiest, most affluent people of this area, this Swami, who hasn't had a bank account in over 40 years, has been asked to speak to us on the subject of simple living and thinking. He said, I'm really wondering what he's going to say. And that was my introduction.
That had to be a fascinating talk with in front of those people.
What I try to explain is, what is simple living? Whether one is a billionaire or a millionaire or an upper middle class, or whether one is, living in a lot of want, or whether one is a monk who has nothing. Mm-hmm. Simple living is having a simple, well-wishing heart. Recognizing that ultimately our real happiness in life is not how much we acquire, but in connecting to the love that's within us. Because the heart is seeking love. to love and to be loved. Things could give some degree of fleeting satisfaction to the senses of the body and the mind, but things can never give fulfillment to the heart. It's only to love and be loved that gives that fulfillment to the heart. And the origin of that love is the love between the living force within us, the true self, what the Vedas call the Atma, the soul. And Jesus says in the Bible that what profiteth a person if they gain the whole world if they lose their own soul? Yes. Our living force, who's seen through the eyes and hearing through the ears, the true me and you, is beyond birth and death. We're spiritual. We're a divine part of the Supreme, of God. And our true potential is to love and to be loved and to express that love through compassion. And whatever we may have, if we recognize that the real joy of life is in using it for the well-being of others, to use it for the pleasure of God, to live in harmony. Yoga means union or harmony, to unite the body, the mind, with our true self, with our essence, with our soul, and to unite our words, our thoughts, our activities with God, with the environment, and with all people. And living like that in whatever status we're in, whether we're engineers or politicians or entertainers or farmers or monks, we could live a very peaceful life in harmony with each other.
Yeah, speaking of that harmony, we're in an election year, and of course, we have the opposing sides insulting, the insults flying back and forth, and so mean-spirited. So it's the whole climate. So I love how you. It would be nice to see people just touting what they're for instead of what they're against about the other person. So there's still a lot of, especially with all the social media and all of this, we see a lot of that. And I'm a matchmaker, so I love what you say about loving within, because I deal with the affluent men who want the perfect-looking woman, and the women who want the rich guy, and so I try to get everyone to go within and look for qualities and love in the heart. And it's challenging. So I will definitely be taking that excerpt from this video and sharing that a lot.
Well, as we all have experienced, physical beauty comes and goes.
Yes, I've experienced that one.
We really don't know when it's going to go, but we know it will go.
Yes.
And physical wealth also comes and goes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the way the economy is today, even in the short term, there's many uncertainties, and in the long term, there's a certainty that everything's going to go.
Yes.
But the real beauty is within ourselves, and when we can recognize the beauty within ourselves as being divine parts of the Supreme, then we can recognize that beauty within others, and that higher principle is where real sustainable love and relationships is to be found.
I love that. And there's a quote in your book that I took some notes here because there's so much good stuff. I love the quote in the beginning of chapter 2. It's from the Bhagavad Gita. "Never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, not in the future shall any of us cease to be." And the chapter's titled, "Who Am I?" And you write that understanding who and what we are begins by understanding who and what we are not. We are not the body we inhabit. We are not the mind either. We live in a body and mind. So, and you give some great analogies, such as the Atma is a passenger seated on a chariot pulled by 5 horses. So, and now that I'm over 50, there's a lot of people in my life that are, dying or announce that they're sick or terminal illnesses. So I would just love to hear you speak a little bit about that chariot and who we really are and how we can maybe get through some of these things.
the body goes through so many transformations in this lifetime. Another verse in the Gita is Dehino sminyata dehe komaram yovanam shara tata dehantara praptir dhirastatara namugite. That an enlightened person sees the reality of what's happening through the various transitions of life. We all have gone through being little embryos in a womb, and then we are infants, babies, children, adolescents. We come to middle age, and then old age, and eventually the body dies. So through all the changes of this body, we're the same person. We're witnessing these transformations. The mind is also changing constantly. When we were little infant children, our minds were really focused on somehow getting the milk of our mother. Now, I'm 65 years old. I can't remember the last time I was thinking about my need for milk from my mother. So many different phases of life create a different mindset. And, the mind is such an incredible experience that, it can hate or it could love within a matter of seconds. Mm-hmm. It can be depressed or it could be elated within a matter of seconds. That's just the nature of the ever-changing mind. So who is it that's witnessing all the changes of the body and mind through all the phases of life? That's the Atma, the soul. And that's who we truly are, and that's who we've always been. And, true self-discovery begins with understanding, who am I? Mm-hmm. We are, the Bhagavad Gita explains, na jayate mariyate va kadachit, that the Atma, or the true self of all of us, is never born and it never dies. It's ever youthful, it's eternal. And it's such ananda. Ananda means happiness. It's full of happiness. We are by nature blissful, loving beings. But somehow or other, we've disconnected from that. The author Emerson has written that the chaos and the tribulations and the divisions of this world are all based on one problem, that human beings are disconnected from their own true self. And that self-discovery is really the beginning of understanding true yoga, true religion, true spirituality. That we're all beautiful beings with an incredible potential because we're all part of an all beautiful, all loving, completely sweet God or supreme being or source. In our tradition, Krishna means the all-attractive, the all-loving, the ultimate unifier. And we are all a part of that. That is our nature. And when we recognize that within ourselves, the beauty and the love, then we see everyone with equal vision. The Gita tells, Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani gavihastini, suni chaiva swapake cha pandita samadarshana. That true enlightenment is not just how much data we accumulate within our minds. It's not about performing supernatural powers. It's not about how many followers we have or how eloquent we can speak. True enlightenment is when we see every living being with equal vision, whether they be black or white or red or yellow or brown in color, whether they be male or female or Eastern or Western or rich or poor, educated, uneducated, whether they're Christians or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or Jain or Parsi or agnostic or atheist. And the Gita goes on to explain whether they're humans or elephants or dogs or cats or cows, wherever there's life, life is sacred. And we can theoretically understand this, and we can create various movements trying to pursue this. But essentially, unless we understand on that spiritual level of who we are, how we really are related to others, and how there is truly equality in the beauty and the sacredness of the life force within everyone. We are brothers and we are sisters. We all have the same mother and father. And when we learn to respect each other, to show concern for each other, and ultimately to love each other, that's the symptom of actual enlightenment.
Well, that's beautiful. When you said it's not how many followers we have or anything, we think about social media now, and we're trying to get likes and follows and all of this. And it's interesting because I've been pondering this a lot lately. So I'm an expert, and I've written books, and I send out a newsletter and do my blog and get listeners in my YouTube channel. And it's always that feeling of I'm not doing enough. And I thought about, we're all kind of chasing something and hoping to get known or famous or a bestseller or something. And I thought, this is not a good feeling, because we're always kind of running ahead of ourselves instead of just enjoying every single thing we share, sitting with it and just being who we are. Right? And I love that you're just so calm, and it seems like anything that would just go is just fine with you. I mean, I love that. That's what I want. I want what you have.
Marla, you have so much. You're a wonderful person. I'm so grateful to hear everything you say. Your realizations, your humility are really beautiful.
Thank you.
And if I could just say one thing, that in the world we live in today, there's so much emphasis on quantity.
Yes.
In every aspect of our life. And oftentimes in pursuance of quantity, we lose connection to the quality of life.
Yes.
And a meaningful, fulfilling life is based on equality. Mm-hmm. And somehow or other, it's not wrong to seek quantity. In fact, it could be very helpful to seek quantity in so many ways in our own life and also in helping others. But it should be in harmony with the quality of our life. And quality is based on character. There's a proverb that you can tell how rich you are by counting how many things you have that money cannot buy.
Oh, I love that.
And, what is it that money cannot buy? It cannot buy peace. It cannot buy the power to love or the experience of being loved. These are things that awaken in our heart according to our enlightenment and also our character. There's another proverb that if you lose your wealth, you lose nothing. If you lose your health, you lose something. Yeah. If you lose your character, you lose everything. And what is it we want to give to our children, our grandchildren? We can give them so many things, but those things can actually really create unwanted competition between them,
Yes.
and a lot of complications and implications that can make their lives miserable.
Yeah, in our own family, in my husband's family, they had a divide of not speaking to each other for years after the parents died and some things happened. So, yeah, it can be. Okay.
So the real thing we want to try to give our children, our grandchildren, is character.
Yes.
That character, that integrity, that having values that are based on what's really important in our lives is, unless we live by those principles ourselves, we can't really help others to take it seriously.
Great point. And I have a question about karma, because that was mentioned in your latest book, and it's a word that we throw around quite easily, and I have a feeling that we might not quite have this concept correctly. So what are the misconceptions? There's something here. Well, okay, on page 238 in your book, you say, although people tell their children that they can be anything that they want to be, that's not always completely true, because our karmic history may limit our achievements in the material sense. So tell us a little bit about karma and that, you can do anything you want. You can be anything you want. I wish I could be Celine Dion, but I cannot carry a tune. So now I must have some bad karma from last time.
It's a very deep subject. The concept of karma, in principle, can easily be understood. But in the detail of how it's working, it's quite inconceivable.
So it's a lot deeper than what goes around comes around.
That's the principle. What goes around comes around, or what the Bible tells, for as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Or, Newton's law of motion is for every action there's an equal corresponding reaction. So the understanding of karma in all these various traditions, which is, sometimes it's explained in various ways, it's to inspire us, to educate us, to take responsibility for what we do and say. Because, how we treat other people, that's going to come upon us, whether it's in this lifetime or whether it's in the future, whether it's a next lifetime or whatever your particular understanding may be. We believe that the soul is eternal, and whatever we do, there will be a reaction. If we do good for others, genuine good for others, then that goodness is going to come to us in various ways in our life. And if we cause harm to others, then it's going to create suffering in one form or another in this life or in the future. So we're meant to be taking responsibility. The idea of karma is not to judge other people, that you're like this because you have done this in the past. That's completely missing the point of why we're given this understanding. It's not to judge people, it's to take responsibility in our own lives. If a person is in a diseased condition, it's not the doctor's role to, you did this because you didn't dress properly when you went out. The idea is, to help the person to get better and to see the potential within the person to be better. And, that's very important, because, crime is so often that if I can get away with it by not being caught by the laws of the state or the government, then I'm successful. But the laws of karma, the laws of the universe, the laws of God, is everything has its answer to what we do. We're responsible for everything we do. And in this way, the principle of karma is to induce us to utilize whatever we have, in a beneficial way. And according to the Bhagavad Gita, when we are in touch with our own souls, when we speak and we act in harmony with our own souls, which is bhakti, which means we're in the spirit of devotion, we're in the spirit of trying to serve God and serve others in a very positive way, then that's beyond karma. That rather than putting deposits in our good karma or negative karma, it actually is a deposit in our enlightenment, which is beyond this material creation. It's based on our love for God, our love for each other, and the principle of love, which is beyond birth, beyond death, beyond all the limitations of this creation. That's our potential.
Wonderful.
And that's what every one of us could connect to if we just focus on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, I want to end with a topic that is dear to my heart and it's actually a topic you talk about in your book, and I was so excited to read this, and it's something that makes it so hard for me to be a human and be on this planet because I can't take it. You in chapter 7 you speak about compassionate eating and the dharma of eating. So you talk about being a vegetarian, and maybe if you talk about a little bit about what, the animals, the billions and billions of animals that are kept in the factory farms and that are treated so horribly, not only just in the factory farms, but circuses and dog fights and cockfights and fur factories, and you can go on and on. I'm a vegan, and I think that every life is sacred, and who are we to say I'm better and you don't deserve to live and you're going to be on my plate? So this is hard for me to love all humans and not judge, because when people know that they're suffering so much and they decide, well, I don't care, I'm having that pork chop tonight. Anyway, it's something that makes me crazy. I don't know how to deal with it, and I love to hear, speak a little bit about compassionate eating and how that ties into spirituality, the dharma of eating.
The first commandment of the Bible is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the natural expression of that love is to love your neighbor as yourself. Everyone is our neighbor. The environment is our neighbor. To truly love God means to appreciate and respect the sacredness of everything that is of God, which, to exploit the environment unnecessarily is, it's a disconnection from our own self. And to violate unnecessarily the rights of other life-loving beings is a disconnection from our own self. I write in this book about one beautiful little story that one of my friends, Sharon, told me. That Sharon and David, they were in Varanasi in India, near the banks of the river Ganges. And as they were walking along a little street, Varanasi, the streets are very narrow lanes and very, very crowded with people and animals and everything else you could imagine. And they saw a three-legged dog. And this dog was hobbling around, obviously really hungry and searching for food. So there was a feeling in their heart, and they went to a place to get some bread. But that dog was no longer around. But so many other dogs were very attracted. So there was a crowd of dogs around them, barking and trying to get the bread, and they were giving one dog at a time the bread, and they would just grab it and snap it and devour it and come for more. And as they were seeing this crowd of dogs, really hungry for this bread, there was one dog behind them who was just waiting his turn. And finally, they approached him, and the dog, his eyes were glazed with humility and gratitude, and they offered him the bread, and very gently he took it in his mouth and didn't chew it, but holding it, he trotted away. They were so mystified by this, they followed him. And they followed him about a block or two, and he went under this cart that was selling different types of fruits and vegetables. And they looked under that cart, and there was the three-legged dog.
Oh.
She was a mother, and she had a little puppy snuggled up to her. And the male dog that took the bread placed very gently the bread in the mouth of the puppy. Mm-hmm. The puppy ate it really enthusiastically. And the mother, the three-legged mother dog, and the other dog, who may have been his father, They were obviously as hungry as that puppy, but they just looked on so satisfied that their little puppy was getting food.
Yes.
So, this is not a human, this is an animal, as we call them. And there was motherly love, and there was compassion.
Well,
there was feeling.
People see that about dogs, though. So the dog's man's best friend, and what's so upsetting is they don't see the cow or the pig or the chicken or the turkey the same way that they see the dog.
That's only because of a lack of communication with these other life-loving beings. In my own life, I've spent years taking care of goats and cows and other animals, and a mother cow is willing to give her life for her little calf.
Yes.
And she'll, I've seen, if the calf is sick, the mother cow, if you just give them a chance to live naturally with each other, she'll cry, she'll do anything for that little calf. And that's the way animals are. We have an eco-village, outside of Mumbai in India, where, we grow our own food organically, and we have water harvesting, and we make our bricks out of our own soil, sun-dried and compressed. And we have, natural sewage refinery. But we also have an animal sanctuary. And there's about 80 cows, but we also have dogs and goats and sheep and horses and different kinds of birds. And when people come and actually get to meet these different animals, they actually experience that they love their life. They're as sentient and as feeling as any of their pet dogs or cats could be. Yeah. It's, compassion should not be selective.
Yeah.
Compassion should be based on not just our particular reference of attachment to a particular being, but to that being himself or herself. And, life is sacred. And in every one of these animals, practically, that people eat, they are sentient, life-loving beings who love their children and who depend on their parents and who feel pain exactly as our cats and dogs do, and exactly, maybe not with the same intellect, but with feeling exactly the way we do. And the more we can expand our compassion to include other life-living beings, the more our compassion is not only satisfying to the heart, but it's empowered to really make a difference in our lives and in the world.
And would you say that when people are taking in this meat and these animal products of animals that have been tortured and slaughtered and kept that way, that it's affecting our DNA and our energy, and we see a lot of anger in the world right now, and there's billions of animals that are in pain, and so anything we take in would affect us, wouldn't you say?
That saying is there, that you are what you eat.
You are what you eat. So
yes. It is true that what we eat, not only from the perspective of karma, but from the perspective of, the physical elements that we take in our body, the energy of fear, the energy of death, the energy of pain that a particular animal is experiencing, in the process of being raised for slaughter or in being killed, that's there in that food.
Yes.
And it's going to affect, our body, and it's also going to affect our state of consciousness. So, it is important that we're very careful that we're, if we inhale polluted air, it's going to affect our whole body. And if we ingest polluted water, we can get typhoid or cholera or so many dysentery, so many diseases. And if we eat food that is karmically surcharged with pain and suffering of a living being, then that's going to affect us. And more than that, Paradukaduki is a Sanskrit word which means persons who are seeking enlightenment. They seek to see another person's suffering as their own suffering and another person's happiness as their own happiness. And animals are people. And whether we have direct relationship with different species of animals or not, that doesn't change how they're feeling and their rights.
Exactly. Yes,
And,
they have the right to live.
In our own country, equal rights at certain times did not extend to people of color, and equal rights didn't extend to the opposite sex. And as our country evolved, it included people of different colors, of different religions, of opposite sex. It included because we recognize that we are really all people, and we are all brothers and sisters, and we all should have rights. And there's anti-cruelty for animals, which gives certain rights to our pets. But as we really look to the hearts of these animals, we feel the need to give equal rights to persons in whatever type of bodies they may be in. Give all varieties of human and all varieties of other species the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, that is a great way to end this. Radhanath Swami, thank you so much for all of your wisdom, and this has been a real joy to have you.
It's really a joy to be with you, and I thank you so very much, and I thank to all of your viewers and listeners, and my prayers that God's blessings be upon all of us.
Thank you.